For more on the Israeli-Palestinian attacks, I'm joined now by Andrew Borene. He is the Homeland Security Director at the National Security Institute at George Mason University. Well, she kind of set the stage for us. Tough spot for Netanyahu. I mean, the election just around the corner. He's got to present kind of a tough front, but you can't go too far, right? I mean, what does he do?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think the world's kind of watching and hoping for restraint. Certainly, Israel has a right to self-defense and a proportional response to the completely unsolicited and completely irresponsible rocket attack emanating from Gaza. Sadly, when these things have escalated in the past, for instance, in 2014, the cost was more than 2,100 Palestinian lives, more than 70 Israeli troops and civilian lives. So I think that the world as a whole is recognizing Israel's right to self-defense and hoping for restraint on both sides to prevent civilian casualties.
Well, you make a really good point here because he needs to be forceful because there's an election around the corner. You want to be the strong leader, but you can't go too far because then what you described could happen. I mean, it could be a full-blown war.
Right, and I think that's, as I mentioned about the world watching, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged restraint and recognized the illegal and completely unsolicited terrorist act of the rocket attack out of Gaza. So again, I think there are some political underpinnings on both sides that make this particularly difficult, and we would certainly hope not intractable. Hamas faces political pressure as it is not managing bureaucratically very well in the Gaza area. Perhaps they did this as a distraction from inefficiencies and ineffective governance. Israel has an election coming up April 9th. Netanyahu is facing an army general with strength on national security and a centrist policy platform. So certainly the underpinnings politically could be very dangerous, but I think all of us in the national security analysis spheres who recognize how costly these things can be are hoping that calm minds prevail.
I want to get to the Hamas piece in just a minute, but the president on Monday basically trying to tip the scales in favor of Netanyahu. A columnist from Al Monitor wrote this: Trump is the first American leader since 1967 whose intervention in Israeli politics undermines the peace process. The strategic repercussions of U.S. recognition of Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights are more far-reaching than those of Trump's decision last year to move the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. Is that a fair assessment, do you think?
You know, I'm not sure how that really relates exactly to the incident of the past 48 hours and the danger of the escalation. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Ismail Haniyeh has been recognized as a global terrorist. And as I mentioned, when a rocket attack emanates from that area, Israel as a country has a right to its self-defense. You know, so I'm not sure that kind of the past political statements or undertakings of the U.S. government would in some way necessitate a terrorist act.
Or provoke anything.
Or provoke a terrorist act by a known terrorist group.
There's been some recent writing about Hamas that there's issues with the political leadership even having control over kind of the military wing of things, that there's kind of some disarray there. What's your sense of that? I mean, is that a fair assessment? Because you were talking about how the leadership has its issues, and we're reading a lot about that.
No, I think, and I do think that, you know, in the past 12 years of Hamas governance over the Gaza region, and due to the blockade, because they're a known terrorist organization, the civilians in Gaza have been suffering. They suffer because Hamas is perhaps not very good at the bureaucratic running of an administrative state for 2 million people. Perhaps insurgency and terrorism is something that they're good at, and the kind of the brass tacks of governance are not their strong suits. And it's sad because the people who suffer are the millions of Palestinians and the 8 million plus Israelis who are faced with potential violence, many of whom don't need or want the political violence in their lives.
Yeah, you put all that together in a cauldron and you've got quite a stew there. Thanks so much for coming in, really appreciate it.
Yeah, and we can pray for calm and pray for de-escalation of what could be a very dangerous situation in the Middle East.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
Thank you.